Hey guys. So today we're going to talk about philosophy. I know you love philosophy. Now don't turn it off. This is fun. So I'm going to talk to you about this major breakthrough I felt I made in a philosophy class when I was in university or college. And about halfway through, and I wrote this. I had these two classes, one with this philosophy professor and another one with this ex White House advisor, um, who now professor, who was teaching a class, a guest class, and also with another professor who was like a super big wig there, who suggested certain reading I did, and between all three of these, one day I was writing, trying to write a paper, and it just hit me, wow, this is just like awesome. This philosophical idea. So, and just to be, just stay it right out. It's very, it's fairly easy. I sort of put it. It's not really mathematical, but I put it in the form of a formula so that people could understand it. And the way it goes is that modern society equals mass plus force. And so what that means, kids, and I'm sorry, I've gotten a lot of flack for this, so I tend to be sort of offensive. But anyway, what this means is that mass. What's mass? Well, mass is, let's assume we know what modern society is. Modern society is today. Like right out here in Los Angeles, California, or any major metropolitan area in the United States, or rural areas too. Just American culture, American ideas, but, modern society. Maybe places in Europe, all around the globe. So that's modern society. And I would say this is pretty much true everywhere in modern society, with the exception of some maybe small tribes or societies somewhere. So anyway, let's start with mass. Well, Ortega y Gasset, in his book, I believe it was called The Revolt of the Masses, defines mass as, when it comes to human beings, as the masses, as someone is an element of the human masses when that person believes just what everyone else believes because everyone else believes it. So this doesn't mean that you believe just what everyone else believes because you've thought about the subject rigorously and critically, had your own unique experiences regarding the subject, and have some sort of expertise that you feel you've come to have about the subject. We're talking about you believe this or whatever it is, you believe X simply because everyone around you believes X, and everyone has always said that X is true, ergo X is true. So, what's this? We can get into really volatile examples, but we can take a, very simple one. Everyone used to believe that the Earth was flat. Evidence came along that suggested the Earth was round, but for a very long time, people kept insisting the Earth was flat. And, that maybe they, no one really knew where this idea began from. Maybe they just looked out there and thought it was flat. And so everyone just sort of believed it, and no one really questioned it until it did become questioned, and then everyone didn't really like the fact that it was questioned. There was this whole epic struggle about that. Then, you could have the idea that, well, certain classes of minorities, belong in a, a secondary status in our country. Well, that's, again, we're talking about, well, if you were raised in one culture and taught to, demean another culture, and everyone around you always did it and no one ever questioned it, and so now you do it. And that's another example of mass. Okay, so, so we're talking about, when people participate in any kind of social movement, whether individually or in a group, that, perpetuates a certain kind of behavior that comes from an assumption that it's never been examined and is only held because everyone else has always held it. This isn't really that, it's not that complex. It's a very simple idea. Everyone around you always said America is great, so you believe America is great. You've never really gone to 6 other countries, lived there for 5 years, participated in their style of life, and you've come to your own conclusion that yes, indeed, America is great. Not many of us have the opportunity to do that even. So what I'm trying to say is that that's mass, and Gasset, postulated near the turn of, I think, the last century, that this was going to become an increasing problem because people who were really intellectual were going to be like fewer and fewer in comparison to the mass, because you see, the mass would just basically be the average person who believes the average thing. And since humanity tends to always go towards averages, that means that the more average people there are, the less attention you're going to pay to the exceptional people, because they don't even have the ability to perceive exceptional people because they're average. And this used to be okay because we were used to be like, face to face with nature, and, or it was like, there was famine, there was disease. And because of these hardships, the mass recognized that there was something good about intellectual people and smart people and clever people and ingenious people, and all these various different ideas. And so they tried to further them, and they even tried to make it valuable that they existed and applaud those values. But when everyone started figuring out the answers to most of our problems, not only don't have the cure to cancer, for example, then everyone started saying, well, we don't need these smart people. All they do is cause us trouble, and we don't understand them. Besides, we would like just to be, left alone and just have it the way we always had it. We want what's in front of our nose, and we want it now. So this kind of a perspective, okay, is basically, what runs the conception and the ideals of what should be, okay? So this is the mass, okay? So let's put that on, we could spend forever defining that. Let's say, so now we have mass, okay, plus force. Okay, so force, let's talk about this. Well, Tolstoy, he wrote a book called The Kingdom of Heaven is Within You. It's a very long book, and only the very last chapter is really worth reading. But when you come to this last chapter, he basically says that it's very clear that society is based on force. And, he was a very Christian man. He believed in the literal interpretation of what Jesus taught. And that included, turn the other cheek, and translating that into, for example, a nation should not have a standing army, because having standing armies perpetuates violence, and violence is against the teachings of Christ. So he didn't believe that, nations should have standing armies, and people thought he was really silly. And what's more is that he talked about how, any time, for example, for any violation, the ultimate outcome is death. Death is inflicted by force. So, if you don't pay your bills, and let's say you're starving, or you don't have money, and then you rob someone, then police are going to come with weapons, and if you don't do what they say, they're going to kill you. And that's just the way it is, apparently. So, for example, if you're robbing a place because you're starving and you need to eat, and the owner, pulls a shotgun on you, and then you hit him over the head with a bottle just in time and you kill him, that was your fault, and now you get to go to jail. And if you don't go to jail, these police officers are going to shoot you in the head. And if they fail, they're going to send a whole team of people to shoot you in the head. And if they fail, they're going to send the National Guard to shoot you in the head. And if that failed, they nuke the entire city. There's some sort of superhuman mutant who's running amok, and we need to stop him. So what I'm trying to say is that, yes, society is based on force. And at any time anything ever goes wrong, the first thing they turn to is force. Call the police come, police can't handle it, they call more police, those police can't handle it, and they call more police. And every one of those new waves of police are more heavily armed than the left. It's called the Grand Theft Auto, scenario. So what I'm trying to say is that, yes, modern society equals mass plus force, because anyone who had any really exceptional ideas that didn't agree with the mass, say they said, I want to just be a philosopher, and I don't want to work a 9-to-5 job, flipping burgers, or rearranging shoes, or polishing manhole covers. I want to do something I feel is more in what my heart wants to do. And if what I want to do in my heart, even though it doesn't appear to harm anyone physically, or even in any other level that I've been able to discern, but if what I want to do in my heart doesn't fit what the mass has decided is economically profitable, then I'm simply not going to profit, and I'm going to have no recourse, and there's not going to be any charity or forgiveness. And if I do anything about it, it's going to be greeted by force. So essentially, you're forced to have to do what they want you, whatever the mass wants you to do. Because you see, the mass can't imagine that there could be any other life than the mass, you see, because that's why they are mass. So you see, they can only imagine life exactly as they prescribe it to be. That's why, for example, all these fans, these NFL football fans, cannot and are just completely puzzled by why their sports heroes are taking a knee during the national anthem. They can't figure it out. They can't even begin to wrap their heads around it because they're mass. You see, they only think as everyone around them has always told them to think. They aren't even capable of understanding why this different, thing is happening when always the other thing always happened before. They can't even comprehend it. They can't even connect the dots, and they're voting citizens. So what I'm trying to say is that when a whole group of people who are clearly not as evolved as intelligence as even the heroes that idolize on their own TVs are dictating your entire life and whether you get to live or die, then yes, modern society is mass plus force. And just as a quick, footnote, I wrote this paper and I submitted the idea to two different professors. It gets complicated. The professor who was the White House advisor thought it was the best paper he'd ever read, I guess, well, at least for that year. And, he gave it an A minus. I would have gotten an A plus, but I forgot to include the bibliography. Imagine! Even with a fucked up mistake like that, I still got an A minus on it. And, well, yeah, I was like that. I get really clever and did forget these little details. If you reminded me, I filled them in just fine. In journalism, I wasn't like that. But when it got into the world of ideas, I just got so excited. Anyway, but then my other professor, just this philosophy professor, he got his panties in a wad about that paper. The first one, the one who was like the White House advisor, he said that, yeah, right on, basically. Because he was the kind of one who would talk about how the poor are considered to be disposable napkins. And but this other one, this long-haired idiot who taught most of the time in Asian countries, who everyone thought was really cool, talked about how there are certain acts that can never be forgiven, and there are an economic society is always a selfish one that never really succeeds, and its only goal is to perpetuate itself. For some reason, he got a real bug up his butt about this paper, and he gave it a B plus, even though I didn't have any. Everything he said I did as far as I knew at the time. And then he came and he asked me to take a special class with him that he was only teaching to certain students. So I said no. And boy, that caused an uproar. The whole school, that caused this uproar. The faculty, the students, I refused. Other students who were in the class got pissed at me. It was just unbelievable. And I said, well, I don't know. I don't appreciate the grade he gave me on my paper. So then this one, really smart professor, I suppose, suggested that I arrange an office meeting with him and talk with him about, this paper and see if we could work things out, because, otherwise I might not get key recommendations that would accelerate my academic career. And so I met with him and we talked, and essentially he told me that the reason that he had given me a B plus on the paper as opposed to a higher grade was because he was on this side of the desk and I was on that side of the desk. So I said I didn't really, I just said, well, with all due respect, if we were in almost any other, discipline, maybe there might be some merit to that, but since this is philosophy, your only option is to give me a sound counter argument, and failing that, all this is tyranny, and I don't want to be in your class. Mm-hmm. And he couldn't give me a philosophical argument as to why I was wrong. That's the whole point of philosophy, dialogue. So no, he couldn't say anything, and instead, he just got this really even more, his panties in even a tighter wad. And then he said it was because in one section I used the word I in it. Now let me tell you, that's normally verboten, but he had told every single student to take this down to the writing center and have them checked. And I had taken that very paper down to the writing center and I had it checked and I pointed out that I used I for certain purposes and they said it was okay and it was actually acceptable use in many modern day, certainly essays. It was becoming accepted to be in modern use. So I went back to him and I told him that they'd said that and he told me, listen, it doesn't matter what they say. I'm the one giving the grade. It's what I say that matters. I'm a world famous professor. And it's sort of like, don't listen to these peons down in the writing center. I'm Sugar Ray Leonard. So, like, who are you going to listen to? Are you going to listen to these people down there or are you going to listen to Sugar Ray Leonard? I'm not kidding you. So then I took that to the dean of faculty and complained about him. And the dean of faculty, he took the letter, he read it, and while he was reading it, he was fidgeting with the paperclip. And as he read the letter, he got the paperclip completely undone till it was just one long, jagged spear. And then he looks up and he says, well, you could file a grade complaint, but it probably wouldn't work. There's really nothing you can do. And that was that. But I never took his class, and I never got any recommendations when I left that college, and I never got any higher education because of that, because, society equals mass plus force.